If part of what hurts you right now is that you didn't want to be the divorced girl, I want you to stay with me for a minute. Not because that label defines you, but because losing the life that you had imagined and the identity that you thought you'd keep can feel like too much at once. You didn't just lose a marriage, right? You lost a version of yourself who wasn't this. And that's heavy in a way that people don't always name. Of course, you didn't want this. Of course, you didn't imagine yourself here. Of course, there's a quiet ache around how this looks, how it sounds, and how it will be spoken about. What will people say about you? Anyone who built a life around being chosen, around being partnered, around being married, anyone who imagined that continuity would feel shaken by this shift. And this isn't vanity, it's not a weakness, it's just a grief for an identity that you wore with pride. So you might notice how much energy goes into that one phrase, divorced, divorced, how it suddenly feels like a deadline instead of a chapter. And it seems to follow you into rooms, conversations, introductions, even when no one says it out loud. And that makes sense. You didn't want to carry a word that feels heavier than your whole story. You didn't want to be reduced to something that doesn't actually like capture your tenderness, your effort, your hope. Nothing about that reaction is wrong. Here's the truth, though, the truth that I want to place in the room without forcing it. Not wanting to be the divorce girl doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It means you care deeply about who you were becoming. And at the end of the day, that label felt sharp because it like is so complex, right? And what you went through is so complex, but it makes it flat. It like cheapens it. And it turns your years of trying and of effort and loving and believing in love into a single word. And your body resists that because you're more than an ending. And what hurts isn't just the word, right? It's the fear that it'll overshadow everything else. That this will be the first thing people see when they see you. That it'll quietly reorder how you've perceived yourself or how other people perceive you. The discomfort doesn't mean you failed. That's for sure. It just means you're standing like at this weird place where you're almost like between identities. And the old identity fell away before the new identity fully arrived. So that in between feels exposed, unbelievably exposed. And I remember sitting with that exact resistance, the quiet insistence of this isn't who I thought I'd be. I had this fear that I stepped into a category that I never wanted to be in. And it wasn't about shame, but it was about loss, loss of ease, loss of the version of myself who didn't have to explain anything. And for a long time, I thought that discomfort meant that I had done something wrong. That if I were more evolved or more confident or more certain, I wouldn't mind the label. But what I was actually feeling was grief for an identity that really mattered to me. I was grieving, and that didn't make me stuck, but it made me more honest. So this doesn't mean you're now defined by what ended. Okay. It doesn't mean that this word will always feel so heavy. And it doesn't mean that your story has narrowed in any way. You don't have to embrace the identity. You don't have to reclaim it. You don't have to make meaning of it yet. You're allowed to say, I didn't want this without this sentence being about self judgment. So at the end of the day, this moment isn't asking you to accept anything all at once. It's only asking you to let yourself be who you are and be where you are without rushing to rename yourself or rushing to rewrite your life. You're still unfolding. And this is not the final language or who you are in the end game. So if the weight of that label feels especially heavy today, let me rest here for a moment. You don't need to resolve it. You don't need to outgrow it. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're allowed to be exactly where you are in this complex, tender place. And I want you to take a breath and let the story loosen just a little. I'm here. And if you ever need a place where you don't have to explain who you're becoming, you can come back to this.